Hi, welcome to the fourth and final series about how the government wanted the railway strikes in order to bring in the new anti-strike laws. Let's go ahead and watch the final video.
That happens, it hampers any ability to realistically sit down in good conscience and try and find a way forward.
So to move on to the introduction yesterday of the minimum service levels legislation, given the point that Mr Lynch just made about essentially the point I made yesterday in the Chamber as well, that if Anti-West Coast and Transpennine can barely deliver minimum service levels at the best of times at the moment, it's quite something. But what's your take, what's the ASLEF's take to this legislation as it stands?
Quite naturally, we have an antipathy towards it. We will seek to see what legal avenues we can take to challenge it. It won't solve the current dispute because by the time it comes through Parliament, goes through the Lords and becomes law, and then the various activities associated with it from all the different companies sitting down and agreeing on separate levels, we're an awful long way away from actually having any current impact. What it does do is exacerbate the current situation, but also I don't see how it can operate safely. I remember when there was a National Fire Brigade dispute, we came to as an industry and said we had to run the whole railway as we did normally, otherwise it'd be unsafe. So if you're talking about running the railway partially, you've already decided nationally that it'd be unsafe to do so. We await events.
TSSA?
Well, I heard the Minister selling it across all the airwaves yesterday as a safety measure. I would invite the committee to ask the Transport Minister if he's had any safety concerns during the process of this dispute that would cause him to believe that such legislation is actually necessary.
Okay, and Mr Lynch?
Well, it does. It tickles me that they will put non-qualified people into signal boxes to break strikes, and they'll have safety incidents, which they have every time they have a strike, when managers break the rules and break their competency basis. But it's the unions that are endangering safety. It's the attempt to break the strikes that imports more danger than anything else. And it's an infringement of civil liberties. The right to strike is something that any democratic society will have. If they want to run the signalling system on Network Rail during a dispute in the way that they will, they'll have to get all the signallers to work, and they will command them and conscript them to work. If they were doing that in Putin's Russia or in Iran or China, they would rightly be condemned. Conscripting workers to go to work against their will is an outrage, and that's what this legislation will bring forward, that either we will name them, or the companies will name them, or even the Secretary of State may name individuals that have to go to work on strike days. How that is democratic and free in a free society, I don't understand, and we'll have to challenge it in every way that we can, and it'll have to be repealed as soon as there's a change in government.
And very brief, quick last question, before we move on to the last question. If you were to have the Secretary of State in front of you or the Rail Minister, what is the one thing you need from them to advance this situation?
I think we've been consistent in saying that it's only the government and the Rail Minister that can take the shackles off the employers in the negotiations. I previously reported to you that we were stunned when we found out that our employers had signed a deal with the government where they couldn't offer more than 2% in pay. We never even got offered the 2% in the last 4 years. Constricting free collective bargaining and then endangering people if they dare to have a voice in it later on is a very difficult direction for any society.
And do you differ from that view or no, not really? No. The same? Okay, thanks.
The employers need to be free to negotiate. At this moment they're not.
We may well be asking them that in the next panel.
We'll probably move on to those questions, but Mike, you want to come in on this point too?
Yes, to Frank Ward first. You recently accused the Secretary of State, and I quote, of actively blocking any improvements to a possible deal. Why do you think this Tory government would actively block any improvements to a possible deal?
Mr Lynch said earlier, I think it's something they've inherited from a previous Secretary of State for Transport. This is an agenda that's been pursued by the government, and it's very much anti-trade union, and we've seen the evidence of that yesterday. I think they've been looking for particular disputes that they could hang this particular legislation on, and it's been encouraged over the last 9 months. We've gradually worked towards the situation that we find ourselves in now.
Thank you. And it's the same really to Mick Whelan and Mick Lynch. Do you feel they're blocking the deal? And what are the motives?
Yeah, I think they have dictated what the companies say. I don't think they can even deny that. It's there in law. It's in the contract. So, but they've got themselves stuck. They thought that the public would hate the trade unions. They thought this would all go away in June. And instead, the reverse has happened, that more unions have joined into campaigns against poverty. And where this is a campaign to drive poverty into our communities, I believe. So last week, and in the run-up to Christmas, I think the whole thing has been choreographed and stage managed so that the action went ahead, so that these announcements could be made according to a timetable, starting with Mr Sunak on Tuesday, I think, and then the announcements of these draconian anti-trade union laws this week, and ending with the choreographed sessions on Monday. So the whole thing has been pre-arranged. It's almost as if there's been some kind of stage director running this dispute. That's why we couldn't make any progress before Christmas, even though I know the companies wanted to. They wanted to come to us with developed proposals, and they were not allowed to by the Department for Transport. And if anyone says that's not the case, they are not telling you the truth. And I'll put that on the record. They have stopped the development of proposals deliberately at every stage in this dispute. And every time we make a suggestion, they have to go and ask the DFT, the 50 people that are working on this, whether they can make a change to the text or indeed the principles of the proposals. And it takes weeks every time.
Same yourself, mate.
It's quite obvious from the chronology of what's occurred. I echo mixed sentiments, but quite simply, our employers know how the rail unions operate. They know that we here are just the faces of the trade unions. We have executive committees and boards who then decide whether things are viable or whether they go to our members. And the very activity of leaking a deal to the press last Friday, before they had the opportunity for it to be properly considered by the trade union to articulate a response back to the industry, they knew exactly what they were doing, and they must have been doing it on the behest of somebody else. Otherwise, why were they set up to fail?
Singling out the DFT, essentially Secretary of State, yes, it's hardwired into the system, isn't it? Process the book lies with them. What's the motivation? What do they need to do to ensure that actually there's a compromise, there's a win-win solution, there's a resolution to this dispute? What steps do they need to take, and why on earth are they driving it? What's the motivation? Your assessment?
Well, it's not. They're not free actors themselves. The DFT, the Treasury, has always run this dispute, whether it's been Mr Sunak in his previous incarnation, and the spending limits and all the rest of it. They decided to defund the railway by $2 billion, plus $2 billion in London Transport, and we've got loads of problems over there that have been slightly hidden by the national dispute. But the defunding of the railway system in general is at the bottom of this, and there's an attempt to defund a lot of services, I believe, and that's what is at the heart of all of the public sector disputes at the moment, that they're not funded properly and people aren't paid properly. People are getting poorer every week. But that is a deliberate policy to transfer wealth, I believe, from working people to people who have got money already. It's all part of a game that's being played in front of us, and this is how it plays out in detail. That's their motivation.
Frank?
I've nothing to add beyond what I said earlier. I think the whole thing's been choreographed in order to allow what happened yesterday, for the business secretary to stand up and say we're going to crack down on trade unions. That's the motivation.
It does appear ideological. I hear stories from the government about wanting skilled, high-paid workers, and then their activities across all sectors, not just the rail sector, actually seem to want to challenge vocational people or people with skills and keep them down. The fact that we hadn't had a pay rise for 4 years, we weren't seeking a pay rise for the 2 years of the pandemic. We only went to Mr Heaton Harris when inflation started going through the roof and when it hit 5.2. Now, if our members were demanding a pay rise, not having had one for the previous 2 years when inflation was 5.2, how do you feel when they find last year inflation going to 14% and in massive double digits and possibly going higher than 14% this year? The idea that 4% and 4% for every condition that we've ever had, because that's what the current deal does, right? A 20% pay cut.
Why is it that there isn't any issue with the London Underground, for now at least, trains in Scotland or Wales? Every train company that reports directly to the Department for Transport is being managed and choreographed to take on the unions on purpose. Is the government to blame for these strikes, or should the union take the blame? As always, leave a comment below.